We left Colorado on April 30th with snow on the ground. Our first night was spent in Palo Duro State Park in Texas. Two days later, we had dinner on the Riverwalk in San Antonio. The San Antonio Gardens specialize in three regions of Texas: the Plains, the Hill Country, and the East Piney Woods. Each of these had also a representative home from the 1800s in the midst of them. We made it to the Gulf Coast at Corpus Christi and visited the Texas State Aquarium. The highlight was seeing the great Pacific octopus move around its tank. A relatively small aquarium, they made it interesting with an activity planned for every half hour.
It's a giant Pacific octopus.
In Houston, we visited the Bayou Bend Collection and Gardens. The mansion is a museum of 18th and 19th century furnishings. It was donated to the city by Ima Hogg, daughter of a former Texas governor. Then a quick visit to Tranquility Park in downtown Houston. The Johnson Space Center was a highlight of our trip. We started by touring the Enterprise shuttle fitted atop its transporter aircraft. Then the tram tour included a visit to the Houston Command Center, as well as seeing one of the three remaining Saturn V rockets. But the best part of the museum was about the International Space Station. Avery Island, Louisiana, is the home of Tabasco sauce. We spent most of our morning in the Jungle Garden, a 170-acre semi-tropical garden filled with natural vegetation and wildlife. The highlight of the gardens was Bird City. McElhenney, who founded this, took upon it himself to restore the snowy egret to the region, which had been devastated for their feathers. He started with 8 egrets, raised them in captivity, and then released them in the fall. They returned the following spring, and now there is a huge colony that returns every year. In the afternoon, we headed to St. Martinville, where the Acadians landed after being ejected by the British in the 18th century from both Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. Nottoway is an antebellum mansion built in 1859, just before the Civil War. All the fireplaces were Italian marble and were designed to burn coal. The gas lights were the most surprising element. They produced gas from the waste of sugarcane at a time when New York City had just started using gas lights. Downriver, we came upon Oak Alley Plantation, a very different mansion. This mansion was not near as ornate and only consisted of 8 major rooms, the public rooms on the first floor and bedrooms on the second. Outside Biloxi, Mississippi, Jefferson Davis's home has a unique shape, an A, designed to provide more air through the master bedroom and dining room. The house was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. In fact, the second floor had water damage 1.5 feet above the floor. We also visited the Jefferson Davis Museum and Library. He had been a congressman and senator from Mississippi, as well as Secretary of War. before becoming president of the Confederacy. In Mobile, Alabama, we visited the Bellingrath Gardens, by chance catching a greenhouse tour. Walter Bellingrath bought this land as a fishing camp. His wife, Bessie, started to develop gardens around the camp. In April 1932, she put an ad in the Mobile newspaper, inviting folks to see her garden, and 4,700 people showed up. In 1934, the gardens were opened up permanently. In 1935, they built their 15-room home here. The home is still furnished with the original furniture. A surprise highlight of our trip was the Naval Air Museum outside Pensacola, Florida. From the earliest air-cooled propeller engines to modern jet engines, each of them were cut open so you could see how they operated. We spent most of our time on the tour viewing World War I and II planes and hearing the stories from our guide. Most of the World War I airmen were trained on the Curtiss A-1 trainer. The Curtiss MC-4 flying boat was the first plane to cross the Atlantic in 1915. The biggest problem was they had to navigate across the ocean with no instruments and needed to refuel periodically, so the Navy stationed 30 ships across the Atlantic every 50 miles. The plane flew from one ship to another, often tracking the smoke from the boilers. The Germans built the first jet, but it wasn't put into production until 1944. You started the jet like a lawnmower by pulling a rope to start a two-stroke engine which started the jet engine. The museum also had the internals of a PBY, the flying boat that was used in World War II primarily for maritime patrol and anti-submarine warfare. After spending the night in Big Lagoon State Park, we went on to the Tampa Bay area, where we visited the Pinewood Cultural Park, and then in the afternoon visited the Henry B. Plant Museum. After the Civil War, Plant created a major transportation network in the southeastern U.S. To encourage tourism, he built several large resorts, including the Tampa Bay Hotel. The hotel could be called the first Magic Kingdom. Built in 1891 at a cost of $3 million, including its arts and furnishing. During the Spanish-American War of 1898, the railroads brought the army and cavalry to the port of Tampa for transportation to Cuba. The war was led by the armchair generals, who would often be seen on the veranda of the hotel. In Orlando, we visited the Morse Museum, known for the largest collection of Tiffany glass in the world. The museum became established after a fire in Tiffany's home after his death. Charles Morse had been a student of his and agreed to take and salvage what they could. A highlight of the museum is the Tiffany Chapel, a recreation of the chapel created for the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. The chapel consists of several stained glass windows, a unique glass cross light fixture, the mosaic altar, lighted cross, and the baptistry fountain. The second major recreation was several rooms of Tiffany's house, especially the Daffodil Terrace. The terrace is supported by columns with capitals consisting of concrete with cast glass daffodils. And of course, in Orlando, you have to go to Disney World. We haven't been there for about 6 years, so we were excited to be back. And we always start with a couple days in Epcot. We timed our visit for the Epcot International Flower and Garden Festival. A whole new world to explore with all the displays of flowers and gardens. And a chance to hear Peter Noon from Herman's Hermits. We end the day by going to Illuminations, our best fireworks show of the park. We spent a day at Animal Kingdom. We always enjoy the rides, like the dinosaur ride, but the highlight is going to the Lion King show. Animal Kingdom is more than just a zoo. For example, the safari ride feels like a real safari, though you see a lot more animals per minute than in real life. And we're always impressed with how many animals are out. They're much more active than the typical zoo. We spent 2 days at the Magic Kingdom, trying out some of the new rides. The Journey to the Sea and Seven Dwarfs roller coaster were somewhat disappointing, but they'd probably be fun for kids.
Hi-ho! Hi-ho! Hi-ho!
Our favorite rides are always Thunder Mountain and Splash Mountain, but we also get a kick out of the Jungle Cruise, particularly taking in the night. I always enjoy Space Mountain. Mary doesn't care for this one anymore, but she tried out Buzz Lightyear. The last of our 6 days at Disney World was spent at Hollywood Studios, starting with the Tower of Terror.
1939. The Hollywood Tower Hotel was a star, a beacon for the show business elite. Until 5 people stepped through the door of an elevator and into a nightmare. Now that door has opened once again. For you.
Our favorite ride here is Toy Story. We had fun shooting at all the targets. And then there's a great movie ride.
Kill my sister. Who killed the Witch of the East? Was it you?
No, it was an accident. I didn't mean to kill anybody.
Well, my little pretty, I can cause accidents too.
Oh, rubbish. You have no power here. Be gone before somebody drops a house on you, too.
Very well. I'll buy But just try to stay out of my way. Just try. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too.
They're adding a lot more Star Wars activities since we were here last, including a movie on how they filmed the series, as well as character visits. Then on to St. Augustine. Built in 1695, the Spanish used this fortress to store rice and other goods in the big storerooms, and then armed the top of the fortress with cannon that could shoot up to 3 miles. The British tried to besiege this fortress for over 50 days, but never succeeded. Instead, they signed a treaty in 1763 to gain possession. The Pirate Museum was fun. Gives a lot of history of pirates in the area, as well as displays with many artifacts from the pirate ships and their booty. The pedestrian walk through the old town was interesting, filled with original old buildings as well as recreations. At the far end of the walk were 3 unique hotels built by Flagler in the 1800s. Jekyll Island, Georgia was a beach getaway and hunting preserve for East Coast millionaires like Goodyear, J.P. Morgan, Joseph Pulitzer, and the Rockefellers. The large clubhouse and many of their cottages are preserved today in the state park. The Georgia Sea Turtle Center rescues turtles from around the area. Savannah, Georgia is laid out in wards, a public square in the center with government or church buildings in one direction from the square and 2 blocks of housing in the other direction. By 1851, the city had grown to include 24 of these wards. Fort Sumter was built on an artificial island in Charleston Harbor. It was strategically located in between forts on each shore, allowing the cannons of the day, which could accurately shoot just 1 mile, to control the harbor. Today, as we visited the fort, the walls are only about a third of the original height, and the center of the fort is dominated by a black-colored battery built in 1898. We did a walking tour of Charleston. Most of the houses here were built in the 1700s. The old town is a peninsula, so the houses are designed to be cooled by the winds that go from east to west. Outside Charleston, we visited the Magnolia Plantation and Gardens, the oldest continuous public gardens in the U.S. Then on to the Charlestown landing site, the original colony here. Time to leave the coast and head back home. First stop, the Carter Library in Atlanta. Over 12 days, he helped Israel and Egypt negotiate a peace accord. After his presidency, the Carter senator monitored 3 elections in new democracies, worked to cure the common illnesses in third world countries, and helped with relief efforts in these same countries. For this work, Carter received the Presidential Medal of Freedom and the Nobel Peace Prize. Chickamauga was fought in September of 1863. Over the course of 3 days, over 40,000 casualties occurred between the 2 armies, second only to Gettysburg. The Confederates won the battle, but the Union Army retreated back to Chattanooga and maintained control of the railroads there. Shiloh was fought in 1862. The Confederates won the battles on the first day, but wasted too much time capturing 2,200 Union soldiers who were decimating the army from the Hornets' Nest. Grant was reinforced overnight and turned the battle around, forcing the Confederates to retreat south. All in all, an interesting 5-week camping trip.